Assalamualaikum and a very good day to you, sir. So today, me, Nurul, Hana, Anis, Adlina and Syahidah from class 2D will be presenting two poems for our poem presentation. We will be reading to you two poems, and the first one is Half-Caste by Agard. Excuse me, standing on one leg. I'm half-caste. Explain yourself what you mean when you say half-caste. You mean when Picasso mixed red and green is a half-caste canvas? Explain yourself what you mean when you say half-caste. You mean when light and shadow mix in the sky is a half-caste weather? Well, in that case, England weather nearly always half-caste. In fact, some of them cloud, half-caste till them overcast. So spiteful them don't want the sun past our rass.
Explain yourself what you mean when you say half-caste. You mean when Tchaikovsky sit down at the piano and makes a black key with a white key is a half-caste symphony? Explain yourself what you mean. I listening to you with a keen half of me ear. I looking at you with a keen half of me eye. And when I'm introduced to you, I'm sure you'll understand why I offer you half a hand. And when I sleep at night, I close half an eye. Consequently, when I dream half a dream. And when moon begin to glow, I have cast human being, cast half a shadow. But you come back tomorrow with the whole of you eye, and the whole of you ear, and the whole of you mind, and I will tell you the other half of my story.
So firstly, I will identify and explain the speaker, situation and setting. The title half-caste is a derogatory term referring to people of mixed race. The speaker is identified as a person who is half-caste, but no further details were explained in the poem. This can be seen easily from the first stanza of the poem. Excuse me, standing on one leg, I'm half-caste. The speaker could either be a female or a male, and it really could be a person who of any mixed race, as it is not stated in the poem. However, the usage of Caribbean Creole in the poem suggests that the speaker is of Caribbean heritage, such as the wid, wid, yuself, and me. We can also assume from the poem that the speaker is probably a sarcastic person, using a mocking tone in his poem, and this can be seen from the second stanza from line 1 to 6. Explain yourself what you mean when you say half-caste. You mean when Picasso mixed red and green is a half-caste canvas? The poem is also filled with rhetorical questions asked by the speaker to the people called him a half-caste. From the first half of the stanza, we can see that the mood of the poem is quite passive-aggressive, and we can see this through the lines like, you mean Tchaikovsky sat down at the piano and makes a black key with a white key is a half-caste symphony? So the sentence might seem polite, however, it is quite clear that there are underlying message under it. Through the second half of the poem, however, the mood turns into frustration and annoyance, like the line, I'm listening to you with the keen half of my ear. This shows how frustrated the speaker is from being called a half-caste. Lastly, the poem is set in England, as it is mentioned in the line, well, in that case, England weather nearly always half-caste. This indicates that the speaker lives in England, although the time is not mentioned in the poem. Thank you.
Okay, this poem could be understood as a mockery or a rant about the prejudice and ignorance that the speaker has to face every day as a half-caste. Okay, we will start with the first stanza. Agard, the poet of half-caste, starts the poem with a short 3-line stanza. He includes the use of sarcasm in the first stanza of the poem, when the speaker pardons him or herself for being half-caste. But in fact, when the poem is being reviewed thoroughly, the speaker is actually being sarcastic and not at all sorry for being half-caste. The speaker is being sarcastic because the term half-caste used in the poem is a term to categorize people of mixed race or ethnicity. It is a very offensive label because caste comes from a Latin word castus, which means pure. Hence, the literal meaning of half-caste is half pure. and it also suggests that being a half-caste might is racial purity, and the people who are called as half-caste are seen as a half as a person. In the second stanza, the speaker repeatedly demands for an answer of what do racist people mean by half-caste. And in this stanza, Agard mixes the language of Caribbean and Standard English. He also uses phonetic spelling to show the pronunciation of the word Caribbean dialect, so people who read the poem could feel as if the speaker is talking directly to them. In addition, this also shows that John Agard is proud of the fact that he is a mixed race. Next, John Agard uses metaphors to compare half-caste to certain things like the art, weather, and music. And these comparisons indirectly show that John Agard thinks that half-caste is actually beautiful, because for example, the mix of red and green from Picasso still gives a beautiful and complete art. Meanwhile, Tchaikovsky mixes black and white piano keys still produces the great music, shows that mixing two races is actually beautiful. Also, in this stanza, the anger of the speaker could be felt as John Agard uses the example of the weather in England and the word spiteful when discussing how the clouds sometimes seem to not want the sun to be visible. The uses of the word rass, that means as, is the big example of how angry the speaker is. In the third stanza, John Agard uses more literary examples and makes the speaker looks literally like half of a person, just like how racist people always see mixed race people as half and incomplete as a person. The speaker also demands for the person the speaker talks to come again tomorrow with a mind that has changed and looks beyond racial labels. In my opinion, John Agard tries to say that racist people who think it's fine to call someone a half-caste is actually the one who is half and less as a person. Last but not least, in the fourth stanza shows that the speaker has a lot more to show and tell, and his life is not all about being a half-caste. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum, my name is Syahidah and I'll be handling for the third question for the poem Half-Caste. So the theme roots, identity and culture suits well with the poem Half-Caste as it is associated with the poet's biography. First of all, John Agard is an Afro-Guyanese born in Guyana in 1949 with a Caribbean father and a Portuguese mother, which makes him a person of mixed race. Adding a little bit of a historical fact here, Guyana went through this tough transition from a colonized country to an independent one. So growing up, Agard became a victim of marginalization. Living in England, he has been called with the derogatory term half-caste by the people there. Thus, after understanding this biographical context of his, it's quite evident how there was a personal sentiment conveyed when he wrote this poem, as this poem addresses racism towards people who are of mixed race. Even the reference to the weather in England makes it more personal, as it is the place where he lived and experienced being looked down as less than others. Therefore, we can conclude how this poem connects to the poet, as it is about asserting his identity towards those who are oppressive against him by asking what the term really meant instead of being ignorant. So basically, this sums up our discussion on our first poem, which is Half-Caste by John Agard. Search for My Tongue by Sujhata Bhatt. You ask me what I mean by saying I have lost my tongue. I ask you, what would you do if you had two tongues in your mouth and lost the first one, the mother tongue, and couldn't really know the other, the foreign tongue? You couldn't use them both together, even if you thought that way. And if you lived in a place you had to speak a foreign tongue, your mother tongue would rot and die in your mouth until you had to spit it out. I thought I spit it out, but overnight, while I dreamed,
I felt that the language that belonged to my tongue, I had spat it out. But at night, I see dreams in my mother tongue. My mother tongue is like a flower. It blooms on my tongue. My mother tongue is like a flower. It ripens my mouth.
It grows back, a stump of a shoot, grows longer, grows moist, grows strong veins. It ties the other tongue in knots. The bud opens in my mouth. It pushes the other tongue aside. Every time I think I've forgotten, I think I've lost the mother tongue, it blossoms out of my mouth.
The speaker, whom gender is not clearly stated in this poem, is someone who is struggling with his or her first and second language. The speaker moved to a foreign country and has to speak in a different language there, and the usage of Gujarati language in the second stanza could be a hint that the speaker might come from India and is staying in a country that uses English language the most. In addition, the sixth line in the poem shows that the speaker is still not comfortable with the new language that the speaker has to use daily. Besides that, the speaker thinks that both languages can be used at the same time. Therefore, the speaker needs to delete her mother tongue as the first language has been used less than usual. Next, the setting could be in any foreign country that uses English as their first language. However, when the speaker begins to use Gujarati language in the second stanza, there is a bigger possibility that the speaker is from India and staying in a country that uses English as their first language. And last but not least, situation. The worries that the speaker might lose her mother tongue could be felt in the first stanza. However, the second stanza, which is narrated in the speaker's first language, shows how the first language returns back to the speaker naturally in the dream. So, the last stanza describes the relief that the speaker feels when the first language never leaves the speaker, although the speaker thinks she or he is losing it.
The line, "You ask me what I mean by saying I have lost my tongue. I ask you, what would you do if you had two tongues in your mouth?" shows how the speaker replies to the question with another question. And this is somewhat controversial because she asks back to us, what would we do if we were in the same situation as hers, that if we were to lose our mother tongue? This is because it is clear that the speaker is someone who is struggling not to lose her mother tongue, and the other person that the speaker is talking to is probably a person of a different culture than hers. The speaker uses this kind of conversation because it appears to be relatable to readers who are raised with different cultures, people who are raised in two different languages growing up. The speaker also sparks a question in the reader's mind for them to ponder when she said, "You could not use them both together even if you thought that way." From this line, she asked her reader to think whether they can actually use two languages at the same time. The line can also mean that the speaker is indirectly saying to those with only one language growing up that they will never know what it feels like to balance between two languages at the same time. The line, "Your mother tongue would rot and die in your mouth until you had spit it out," emphasizes how she assumes that by constantly using a language other than your mother language, you will eventually forget your mother language, and in the end will never know how to speak the language again. The last two lines, "I thought I spit it out, but overnight while I dreamed," says that the speaker had thought she actually lost a part of her, but it is actually a foreshadowing of a good news in the next stanza. Okay, so for the second stanza, this stanza is actually written in the speaker's mother language, Gujarati, and has been translated to English. From this stanza, the speaker shows how she can still speak her first language despite thinking that she had spat it out due to the lack of her mother tongue use in her everyday life. From this translation, the speaker shares with readers that she dreamt in her first language, and in her dream, she visualizes the beauty of her mother tongue as a flower. In addition, the meaning of the stanza shows how the speaker isn't shy to use her first language as she is proud of her native language. It shows that no matter how often she uses another language, her mother tongue will never fade inside her. Okay. So for the last stanza, the third stanza, the stanza starts with the line, "It grows back. A stump of a shoot grows bigger, grows moist, grow strong veins. So this is a reference to the second stanza, where she visualizes the language as a flower. So the it in the line refers to her mother tongue, and as the poem goes further, it is understood that the speaker is trying to say that no matter how much she thinks she has forgotten the language will never disappear inside her. In fact, it will be stronger as time goes on. The language itself will come out of her without her realizing it, as it will always be a part of her identity.
First of all, we can see how the theme roots, culture, and identity becomes more prominent as it highlights on the poet's personal thoughts regarding her divided identity. This identity is represented by her native language. A little biography about Sujhata Bhatt is that when she was at the age of 5 years old, she and her family left India to move to New Orleans and stayed permanently in Connecticut when she was 12. Sujhata Bhatt claimed that it was her separation from India that made her feel closer to the country. Even so, she confessed how she found it liberating to write English poems because she found English books to be more exciting, as she adored them very much back then when she was a kid. Having said that, it was also stated in the same interview that when she was furthering her studies in America, she found it hard because she felt as though her writings didn't belong to neither the Eastern nor the Western traditions. She felt alone and disconnected from the other writers because her works didn't exactly fit the American standard. So this ignited Sujhata Bhatt to write the poem Search for My Tongue. So it clearly shows how this poem reflects the inner conflict Sujhata Bhatt had as she tried to survive in a foreign country that has a totally different culture than hers in India without losing a part of her identity, which is her mother tongue and also her culture as a whole. And with that, I think we just basically sum up our discussion for our second and last poem, which is Search for My Tongue, written by Sujhata Bhatt. That's all from us. Thank you.